we're going to start off with respiratory health. The two others that we're going to cover are cardiovascular health, and then we're going to finish with cancer, and we're going to talk about this thing called a PAH. If you're not familiar with that, we're going to really explain that. So with respiratory health, our main concern is cell damage. This is a study I'm going to reference in just a moment, but I'm going to explain to you how this cell damage in your lungs occurs. So essentially, when you smoke cannabis, you're breathing in roughly 500-degree smoke, right? That's the level, that's the temperature of combustion. So this has a really big impact on not only the cells in your mouth, which we'll cover when we get to cardiovascular, but it really affects the cilia that line your lungs. That cilia is what keeps us healthy. So essentially, if we breathe in bacteria and toxins, it's what traps those and enables us to excrete them. So if we do not have cilia that can produce mucus, which is what happens when that cilia is damaged over time, then we can't expel these toxins. And essentially, we're making ourselves immunocompromised. At the same time, likely you may be inhaling bacteria through whatever device that you're using. So we are now immunocompromised and adding an additional risk through the exposure of these things. So this is something that we need to be concerned about and aware of, because ideally we don't want that temperature to be that high. And so how would we avoid that? Well, one of the best ways that we have as consumers to avoid that high temperature is something called a water pipe, right? A bong. Essentially, when smoke is passed through a bong, when it's contacting the water, the temperature of that smoke is going to drop roughly 10% immediately. So as we increase the amount of filtration, the more decrease in temperature that we have. If we do not clean our bong, this is what occurs. And we're going to go into this very briefly. This is a study that was done by the NCIH. This is for a 23-year-old male who was diagnosed with necrotizing pneumonia, which is essentially a form of pneumonia that is incredibly hard to treat with antibiotics and has essentially gone rampant and is now no longer able to be effectively treated with antibiotics. This occurred. This patient essentially showed, this was in 2016 that this patient arrived in the hospital. This patient was smoking out of a dirty bong, which I'll show you what that bong looked like right here. It's on the left. The doctors actually went to the house, they had someone pick it up, they brought it in and they swabbed it. It tested positive for the exact same bacteria that that man was infected with. The result of that guy, what happened to him, essentially he had necrotizing pneumonia, which developed into a pleural effusion, which essentially what that means is when our cilia is damaged so significantly, it cannot produce that mucus, and essentially when the walls of our lungs touch each other, it acts as like an adhesive tape. If you stuck the two, it's like sticky sides of a piece of tape together, and it gets trapped and it can't release, and that's called a pleural effusion with a trapped lung. And that guy has a bunch of fluid that's built up in that lung, as you can see, and that needs to all be removed. The lung then needs to be separated. There either needs to be surgery performed where they go in and remove the outer layer of cilia, which is an incredibly painful, as you can imagine, process, because they're essentially scraping the inner lining of your lung to remove that, to refresh that surface. So what we're going to talk about is how we avoid these things, because this patient never fully recovered. He declined surgery. He was treated with a 4-month course of antibiotics, and he never recovered function of that lung. So he still only has 50% breathing capacity. This was all of a result of this person not cleaning their glass. So, cardiovascular health. We are very well aware that cannabis is a vasoconstrictor. We have been for a long period of time. The reason why it has historically been associated with heart problems is because, similar to having a couple cups of coffee or being very stressed out, it's going to increase your risk of having a heart attack. This does not increase your risk of having a heart attack if you don't have any pre-existing issues, right? So where can cannabis in that case affect our heart? Well, let's look at oral health. So in our mouth, we have these things called, we have this process called necrotic cell death that occurs when our gums and the cells that line our mouth are exposed to temperatures in that combustion range. So what happens is those cells are damaged so significantly that they end up dying, and then their contents are released out into the surrounding tissue. This is inflammation. So that's problem number one. Exposure to high temperature on our gums is going to cause some cell damage and cell death. Then we have the secondary issue, which is oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is performed by the number of free radicals being in the body that overload the body's capability to counteract these. Those free radicals are essentially the toxins that we're breathing in. Now, why we're talking about combustion and bongs is because, for me particularly, I have Lyme's disease. I've had it for 5 years. I have a pretty terrible back. I really like the pain benefits that I receive from combusting cannabis. If I use a vaporizer, I do not get the same effects because the chemicals such as THCV and CBN, which are additional psychoactive and pain-killing drugs, or chemicals, excuse me, are not activated at a vaporization level. So they're also then additionally not activated through edibles. However, edibles have been proven to be almost as powerful, if not more powerful, through they basically increase the power of them through your digestive system. We're not going to get super into that today, but that is something that's pretty interesting. So this is kind of showing what like the lining of your gum looks like. As it gets damaged over time, essentially what occurs is this thing called periodontal disease. This is well correlated, like doctors have known this for about 15 to 20 years, that smoking cannabis causes periodontal disease. Periodontal is a gum disease that can lead to heart disease. And it does so by allowing bacteria to access through your gum into your body, into your heart, which then leads to really significant heart disease in later date. So when we're talking about cannabis and the health risks associated with your heart, it's not just that it's a vasoconstrictor, it's also that we're also additionally exposing ourselves to potentially contracting heart disease. So all of these things are concerning, but when we go a little bit further, we have PAHs in cancer. What are PAHs? So if you've ever smoked through a pipe, a bong, a joint, anything, and you see that resin collecting, that dark colored resin, that's a PAH. That stands for a polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon. That is the same substance that's produced when you smoke tobacco. And the reason for that is that it's an organic plant material. Any organic plant material like this is going to be producing that polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbon, which is carcinogenic. Not even like a little, it's very carcinogenic. Almost at all costs, we should avoid contact with this type of substance. If you see someone drinking dirty bong water, which I have, like it's blows my mind, because essentially the way that a bong works is that typically we are aware that PAHs are not water soluble, so we're not dissolving PAHs in this water as we're filtering it through a bong. But what we are doing is a process called absorption. And absorption is similar to when we had if we have sand and we pass a liquid through it that has particles in it, that particle is going to get trapped. So in a similar concept, when we smoke through a bong, we are essentially filtering that smoke. The PAHs in the smoke are attracted to the surface of the water, and essentially when they're passed through that, they're retained in that medium, preventing them from coming into our lungs, which is really what we want to do in all cases. Those PAHs, as I mentioned, are toxic, they're cancer-causing, they can cause additional problems with our lungs and damage our cilia. It can also line your lungs with that resin if you're unable to excrete it because your mucus and your cilia cells are not active. So that's a really big problem. So this is what an example of that PAH looks like. It's that yellow, dark resin. It's gross, it's nasty, it's relatively challenging to clean. So previously, a lot of people, like when I was in high school, we would throw bongs away before we'd clean them, right? It was that challenging. But at this point, we have basically tools that enable us to clean our glass really efficiently and quickly. And so nowadays, there are a number of companies, I own one of them, that basically creates products that enables users to smoke how they want to smoke and experience the effects that they want to experience, but without having the additional negative impacts that are associated with that. So, can bongs be healthier? Yeah. So as we mentioned, bongs can essentially decrease the temperature of the smoke, which decreases the damage to our gums, which then can prevent heart disease, which we want to avoid at all costs. The second piece is that it's going to capture a portion of those PAHs and other toxins that are released from that smoke, and then it's going to retain them in that. We're also still able to get those additional psychoactive benefits from the smoking because we're at those higher levels. We're getting the activation of THCV and CBN at that level. And then finally, what are the other options that consumers have? Okay, so almost everybody's had an edible. They work really well. They're a little confusing. I'm not a huge fan of edibles. I like to control the dosage very effectively, so smoking is really the best option for me. The second best option is that vaporization. And with that vaporization, essentially, we're able to activate CBD and THC. Those are really going to be the only two chemicals that are going to be able to be activated at those lower temperatures below that 500 degree. So yes, you can totally get benefits from it. If you are seeking certain benefits, you may not be able to access them through that. Tinctures and edibles seem to be the most effective way for pain reduction in people that don't want to experience any sort of additional issues with smoking. If they have compromised lungs, this is something that's really great for you. This is really going to benefit you. So essentially, when we're using a bong, I'm just going to go over really briefly, I don't have a slide on this, but in terms of maintenance for your bong, if you do not clean your bong, it will do you no good. It will not help. It will actually cause additional issues. So a bong is really only a useful tool when it's maintained and cleaned regularly. What does that look like? So that looks like adding a 2-part cleaning solution ideally to your bong. You've emptied out the water at this point. You shake it. You scale all of that resin, that PAH off the side, and what we're doing at this point is removing any of that bacteria that's developed in this stagnant water over time, because bongs are a relative haven for bacteria. We have stagnant water, we have a medium that's being heated and cooled over and over again, and additionally we're adding an organic substance which that bacteria can feed, subsist, and multiply off of, right? So over time, we're developing like a science experiment, essentially, in this bong. So what we want to do is keep that clean, replace that filter media so we can continue to trap as much PAHs as possible as we're smoking. And then on top of that, we're eliminating that bacteria. And so we're refreshing the media and we're removing all of that bacteria from any accessories, whether that be a downstem or a slide. And that's going to enable you to be able to smoke how you really want to smoke if you're a bong person, without having any additional impacts to your heart health, your respiratory health, and just keeping an eye on these things is really going to benefit people moving forward in keeping them healthy and smoking how they want to smoke. So that's all I got for you. Thank you very much. Any questions before?
So just actually promo